Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We're using the Johnson edition. We are now at poem 220, Could I Then Shut the Door? Now, when we get to poem 1063, we'll have quoted a line from that poem a number of times, especially as it relates to these really short poems here. Notice the three lines. Ashes denote that fire was. Almost no other poem that's so short will be able for us to play the game so well as this poem, as we will begin to read below the epidermis and figure out what is actually going on here. Another Sue poem, another possible poem to suggest crisis in their relationship, and in many ways, like the questions in 213, the expected answer in this poem is no. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through a set of introductory comments. I'm hopeful that you as well have already worked through our previous poems. Again, we've worked now up through and including poem 219, and now we're ready. And now we're ready to move on to poem 220. The question of this poem, and it is a question, or is it? Maybe it's an indictment, is going to be problematic because it's not exactly clear what Emily is saying. It's maybe in some ways more possible that Sue would end up shutting Emily out because of the new baby. Remember Ned's birth of 19 June 1861. It's clear that something is going on here. Sue will send a note that will be of some significance. She will say in October of 1861, quote, this is a note that Sue sent to Emily. Quote, I have intended to write you, Emily, today, but the quiet has not been mine. I should send you this, lest I should seem to have turned away from a kiss. If you have suffered this past summer, I am sorry. I, Emily, bear a sorrow that I never uncover. If a nightingale sings with her breast against a thorn, why not we? When I can, I shall write. End quote. Now, it is a note like that which allows us to read this poem, and as we said from 1063, ashes denote that fire was. She says it this way: Could I then shut the door, lest my beseeching face at last rejected be of her? Now, again, this is difficult to interpret in some ways. Many have read this poem as a question about rejection. How is it possible that Sue has rejected me in this way? Is it possible I could ever have done something quite like it? Notice the I here, and then the dash, and then the then, and then the dash, and then the phrase, shut the door. Now, let's say out loud the irony that this is a woman writing this poem who will live much of her adult life shutting the door, right? That is to say, she lives as a recluse. Now, we're going to pay attention to poem 248. And we were working with this poem a couple of lectures ago. Why do they shut me out of heaven? Did I sing too loud? But I can say a little minor, timid as a bird. And then wouldn't the angels try me just once more, just see if I trouble them, but don't shut the door. You can see the phrasing. Oh, if I were the gentleman in the white robe, and they were the little hand that knocked, could I forbid? Notice the language is very, very similar to this, with could I then shut the door, lest my beseeching face, you'll remember beseeching from 201, at last rejected be. Now, I find this fascinating that she uses the word rejected here. There's only one other time she'll use this word rejected, and it's when we get to poem 295. Only other use of this word rejected. It is clear that Emily struggled with feeling rejection from the master, as we've talked about, whoever that is. It isn't completely clear whether it's Boyles or someone else. And then her pal, Sue. Of course, some will say her lover, Sue, depending upon how you interpret their relationship. What is it that she's really asking here? I think the argument is that she's asking a rhetorical question. Could I ever have rejected you as you have rejected me? Is that even possible? And I think in 2A, that's her point, that rejection, even perceived rejection, is hard, right? As we said, maybe by master, maybe by Sue. And 2B, note the more serious tone of this poem. Many have pointed out there's not a lot of playfulness in this poem at all. Often Emily will kind of play around but be mean at the same time, or be a bit caustic. Notice there isn't any of that play at all. In other words, she seems to be suggesting I could never do to you what you have done to me. At 3a, well, obviously the idea of being rejected, and all of the titles that we're familiar with that have rejection standing behind them, but we just read poem 248 with good reason. Again, the idea of shutting the door. Finally, to own a poem like this at 3b, what was a time when you had to deal with rejection and you had to kind of struggle through those feelings? What was a time when maybe a pal of yours felt like you had rejected them when in fact it wasn't the case at all? You'd probably just really busy or something. Thank you.